Hey there, it's Jose. I am working on a watercolor painting today. On my Instagram, I asked if any of my cosplay friends wanted some of their pictures turned into drawings or paintings, and this is the first one I'll be doing in that series. To start, I'm doing some sketching with a light gray and a light blue watercolor pencil. I'm doing this so that the color can be dissolved into the painting. Next, I'm going with some masking fluid and covering up some areas I want to remain white. For more details about how to use that, watch my 15 tips of watercolor paintings video I made earlier. This is my Dr. P.H. Martin's watercolors. I'm going to be using these as well as my Jerry Q watercolor palette. And here's what the inside looks like. It's pretty messy, but it's quite useful. So I've gone ahead and I taped down my paper so that the edges don't lift up. Again, this is partly explained on my watercolor tips video. And I'm starting with a wet on wet technique to do the backgrounds, and it's going to be kind of like a galaxy, night sky, starry night background. So I'm going through some colors so that it's not straight up just plain black, but I'm adding some lighter tones, and then I'm going in with the black little by little, just building it throughout. That way it is not just one flat plain color, because looking at my reference picture, there's definitely some different colorations in the background. It's not just a plain black. And it just would be a little boring if that was the case. So a technique you can do when you want to create some textures on your watercolors is to add some salt. I was out of regular salt, so I was using some sea salt, and I haven't used them before with my new watercolor, so I wasn't sure how I was going to react. I just added some and then I let everything dry, and the concept is that the salt soaks up some of the water and some of the pigment as well, and this is what it ends up looking like. It's a little too extreme for my taste, so I am going to go back and re-add some colors to the background, plus it's a little too light as well, so I need to work on that a little bit. But as you can see right now, I'm just brushing all the salt off. But yeah, it gives you a lot of texture that way. So going back, I'll try and smooth it out a little bit, keep some of the texture to it, but it's not as drastic. And I do plan to add some stars later on in the video, so I didn't want for that to not be able to be seen because of the texture added by the salt. Now I'm going through, and you can also use some rubbing alcohol. Will have a similar effect to a blending color pencil almost, where it kind of just creates more of a texture without getting rid of the color too much. So I did that throughout the bag to kind of make it look more of as a distant, there's some atmosphere throughout the background, instead of just it being so brightly and powerful. Because although there's going to be a lot of colors and some darker tones in the foreground, I don't want for it to look too flat, so I wanted to do that with the rubbing alcohol. Now I'm going through and adding some lighter tones just to kind of start getting it all kind of figured out. As you saw from earlier, my sketching was very minimal, so a lot of the details and a lot of the forms I'm creating with the watercolor straight on the paper. I'm comfortable doing this, but if you're not too comfortable doing that, I suggest going through and doing a very well detailed watercolor pencil sketch, because like I said, once you start painting with watercolor, it will dissolve that. Those lines will get dissolved mostly into the watercolor painting, so you won't really see them at the end, but it does give you a nice place to have a guideline. So I'm going back, noticing that I do want some of the brighter colors in the background to be a little bit toned down. So I'm going back and adding some darker tones to the background. Now I'm going ahead and focusing on some of the lights that are being reflected on the clothing and the skin, and getting some of the darker tones in there just so I can start roughly getting some of the shapes and forms that are being created by the cloth. And the cape on the back also has a lot of very dynamic lighting on it, so I want to make sure that that's slowly but surely I'm building up to that. Sometimes I do this where I kind of go back between the light colors to the darker colors, and that just helps me have a better vision of where everything's kind of falling into place, because it allows me to get the forms down and kind of fill the gaps in between, instead of just finding myself kind of creating just like a mosh posh of just different colors everywhere. And since this is a human figure, the proportions and how things end up at really do matter. It's going to make or break the painting. If I was doing a landscape or something like that, then you have a lot more leadway of how the forms end up on the page, but I wanted to make sure that it stuck closely to the picture I was sent. That way it looked real, it looked like a real person standing there, not just a non-human form that looks human. Now adding the facial hair and the hair, eyebrows, and little details like that, start really making it look like there's a person right there in front of the night sky. Now I'm doing some of the lower body parts. There's going to be a lot of smoke and fog in near the bottom, so I'm not too concerned about getting that much detail on. Now to the stars. You've probably seen this before, where you can use a toothbrush to create a paint splatter effect. I'm using some acrylic painting, and this is my trick, so it's not streaky and it's more consistent. I just grab a small amount of paint and I dip the toothbrush once, and using one finger I just flick it. If you use a lot of paint or it's too watery, you get some beautiful different size spots, but you might also get some like light streaks throughout the painting that makes it look very obvious that it was, you know, paint splatter on the painting itself. So I like to take it slow, little by little. As you can see, there are a lot of little defined dots, but I just do the same. Just grab a small amount of paint and just dip the toothbrush once into the water, and then use it just like that. Now I'm going through and using my finger, I'm rubbing off some of the masking fluid so I can start painting the areas that were previously covered up by the masking fluid that I wanted for them to remain white. Using a small brush, I'm going in and I'm really starting to focus on a small detail. One thing that I like to do, which not everyone does, is I like to go from rough shapes and sizes and work my way throughout to the small details. A lot of people can do more of a printer technique where they start in one section and they can start with small details and then they're able to finish the painting completely. I work differently, so in my case I get everything covered and then I work little by little, adding the details all throughout the whole painting. Plus something like this where you kind of want to keep the color similar and kind of have everything have a similar flow, you do want to go in and have a more consistent look all the way throughout. Now I'm adding some details using some white acrylic, and I'm going over some of the areas that I used the masking fluid, and I turned the lights down. I realized while taking this video that a lot of my paintings or drawings look very washed out. This is what it actually looks like up close. It's because I have my light up all the way, so I was able to turn the lights down a little bit and I can still see but not as good, but the video ends up looking a lot better this way. So here I'm using my airbrush. There are 2 spotlights behind the person right here, so I'm using a airbrush so that I'm able to create that light effect that otherwise would have been a little spotty and muddy, going from a very light tone to the black. And then I did some rough shapes on a piece of paper, and that's how I'm trying to create the fog effect in the bottom. Again, still using my airbrush, and I'm just using the same watercolors in the airbrush for that. To me, it works pretty well because it water downs easy, and then it kind of mixes well with the rest of the paint. Now going back, adding some of the darker areas that were a little lightened up by the airbrush, and getting some of the final details on the lights as well. Alright, so here is the finished piece. Again, this was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate everyone that sent me a message for me to create art based on their pictures. Obviously, disclaimer, I did not create this design. This design was provided to me by someone else. But I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys have a good day. Bye. Thanks for watching my video. Make sure to like it, leave a comment below, and for more art related videos, go to my channel and subscribe.